Hi, I'm Kaylin. I fix broken air conditioners for a living, but it turns out nothing prepared me for how cold family could be. At my sister's birthday, she handed me a paper plate and said, AC guys eat last, while everyone else sipped champagne off real china. My own mother laughed. No one flinched. They've been erasing me for years, cutting me out of photos, calling me the help, rewriting memories I paid for. But the day I found out the scholarship they brag about had my name on the check, that was the day I stopped being quiet. What would you do if the people closest to you didn't just ignore your worth, but claimed it for themselves? It was one of those late spring afternoons where everything felt artificially perfect. The backyard was dressed like a magazine spread folded napkins, glass pitchers of lemonade glistening with condensation, and just enough twinkle lights to make the evening feel curated. The kind of party where everyone's smile seemed staged for an invisible camera. I arrived quietly, like I always did. No fanfare, no one rushing to greet me. My boots crunched over the manicured gravel path as I scanned the crowd. Familiar faces, neighbors, church friends, old colleagues, everyone clustered in cheerful clumps around my sister, Isolde. She looked like she belonged there. Flowing linen dress, arms gracefully moving through the air as she told a story that made them all laugh. I stood at the edge of it all, like I had wandered into someone else's event. Isolde spotted Mayer, eyes barely flickered. Then she smiled, loud enough for the group to hear. Oh, good, our resident HVAC genius has arrived. AC guys eat last paper plates are over there. They laughed. Not because it was funny, because they didn't want to be the one who didn't. I felt their eyes on me, like I was a character someone else had written into the story. I found the stack of plates. She wasn't kidding, they were thin, cheap, the kind that collapse under a scoop of potato salad. I grabbed one, careful not to let my hand shake. It was ridiculous how something so small could feel so sharp. As I stood in line for food, I heard someone behind me whisper, "She still works in air conditioning, right?" "Yes," another replied, "but like small stuff, not real systems." I didn't turn around. I'd heard versions of that my whole life. I scanned the tables. Most were full already, occupied by Isolde's friends or extended family who treated her like royalty. I found a seat near the far end of the garden, behind a decorative trellis, almost like the table was hidden on purpose. The plate on my lap sagged under the weight of food I no longer had an appetite for. My mother, Vera, sat only a few feet away, but she didn't even glance in my direction. Instead, she fussed over Isolde's hair, smoothing it like she was a child on her first recital. Always doting. Always perfect. I was background noise. Every so often, it'd catch someone's gaze, then they'd quickly look away. They didn't want to be caught noticing me. That was worse than anything else. That's when you know, you're not just being ignored, you've become inconvenient. I thought about leaving. I imagined standing up, putting the paper plate on the edge of the table, and walking out without a word. But my feet wouldn't move. I heard my grandfather's voice in my head, salace calm, and measured like always. You don't need to shout to be heard. Just wait until it matters. He died 5 years ago. Sometimes I wonder if I stopped being visible the same day he stopped breathing. I stayed. I watched Isolde raise her glass for a toast. The crowd leaned in, adoring her. "To family," she said, her voice warm like honey. "And to second chances." A second chance for what? I wanted to ask. For pretending I wasn't sitting right there? I didn't. I smiled. The kind of smile you wear when your throat burns. I sipped my drink and played my part. I knew how to do that. I'd had a lifetime of rehearsal. Across the lawn, Isolde locked eyes with me just for a second. Her smirk held subtle, calculated. She knew exactly what she was doing. And I knew something too. She didn't know I wasn't just walking away. I was walking toward a decision. But before I could even finish that thought, the sound of silverware clinking against champagne flutes signaled yet another toast. I hadn't moved far. I was still in the garden, a few feet behind one of the catering tables, out of direct view, but close enough to hear. Isolde stood near the center, glowing beneath the patio lights like some pageant queen from a town too proud of its own history. She raised her glass with ease, her voice lifting as though rehearsed. To family, she said, for always believing in me, even when I doubted myself. There was a chorus of cheers, and everyone drank, smiling warmly. My mother, Vera, practically sparkled beside her, shoulders straight, chin up, every inch the proud matriarch. No one looked at me. I hadn't been mentioned, not even as an afterthought. As people started murmuring their approval, a woman near Vera leaned in and whispered, "And who's that again?" Her finger pointed discreetly in my direction. Vera laughed. "Oh, that's, Kara? Kylie?" She squinted, then let out another soft chuckle. "She's the younger one, works with heating or cooling, one of those." That did it. Not just the hesitation, not just the name. It was the ease with which she forgot me, or chose not to remember. I wasn't sure which one was worse anymore. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. My hands stayed still, fingers lightly gripping the stem of my untouched glass. The silence around me wasn't external, it was the kind that came when your own presence felt like static no one wanted to tune into. I stepped aside, weaving through bodies that didn't notice me, until I was standing near the edge of the pool deck. The string lights above hummed faintly, their glow too soft to cut through what I was feeling. I wasn't angry, not yet. It was something cold or disbelief that no longer surprised me. I didn't expect to be celebrated. But being erased? That took intention. I turned back toward the crowd. Vera was still holding court, smiling tightly at another guest. I walked up to her, not dramatically, not demanding, just present. "Mom," I said calmly, "can I talk to you for a second?" She didn't even turn all the way toward me. "Sweetheart, don't ruin the mood. It's as old as night. It'll only take a minute." Her eyes met mine briefly. There was something between annoyance and embarrassment there. "Kaylin," she said, dropping her voice so only I could hear, "please don't make this about you." That sentence. The softness in it wasn't kindness. It was control. I nodded once. Not in agreement, just acknowledgement. And I stepped back. A few people noticed the interaction. I saw their glances, the way their eyebrows rose slightly, then quickly reset into indifference. A woman I vaguely recognized from high school gave me a brief look, a flicker of sympathy, not curiosity. The kind of glance people give to a dog that's clearly been hit too many times, but still walks without limping. Then, as if on cue, Isolde lifted her glass again, this time directed vaguely toward my section of the lawn, and smirked. It was barely perceptible, but I caught it. That wasn't a smile of affection. It was victory. She knew I'd tried to say something. She knew Mom had dismissed me, and she liked it. I swallowed back 1,000 versions of things I could have said. Not here. Not in front of this audience, who only knew how to clap on cue. I walked back to my seat. It was still empty, tucked behind a low hedge near the edge of the lawn. I sat down, folded my napkin in half, then in half again, over and over until it resembled a paper fan. I stared at it, thinking how odd it was that this napkin had seen more of me tonight than most of the people here. No one forgot me. They just didn't need me to exist tonight. I hadn't said a word, but I knew the next one I said would count. Still, I stayed quiet. That night had already carved enough hollowness into me, and I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of watching me bleed. Instead, I slipped inside the house. Not because I wanted to hide, but because I needed to breathe. The hallway was cooler, quieter. I passed the kitchen, where the catering crew bustled politely, trying not to overhear the evening's politics. I turned toward the sitting room, then stopped. Along the far wall stood a display Isolde had clearly curated. Framed photos arranged by phase of life. Graduation, sorority formals, a semester abroad, birthdays, even baby pictures. Her timeline, frozen in pastel mats and gold-trimmed frames. I scanned the wall slowly. Not one photo of me, not a single shared memory. Except one. Christmas, years ago. She was 6, I was 4. I remember the itchy sweater, the smell of pine needles on the carpet. I remember sitting on the floor beside her as she opened a music box. But in the photo, there's only Isolde in the box. The left side of the frame where I should have been is cropped. Clean cut, clean erasure. I stepped closer. Maybe I was remembering wrong. Maybe I'd imagined being there. But no, I knew the look in her eyes. The exact way she held that lid. Tilted just so. I had been right next to her. I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been removed. And that's the part no one ever talks about. When your absence becomes part of the decor, it's no longer accidental. I backed away, feeling the slow, familiar ache behind my ribcage. Not anger, not even pain anymore. Just the recognition that I had been edited out of the family history. Not for being bad or absent or difficult, but because I wasn't shiny enough to fit the narrative. I turned back toward the dining room to collect myself, but a different impulse caught me. I had brought a giftone I'd spent weeks putting together. A custom photo album, scanned, restored, printed on linen-bound pages. Childhood birthdays, camping trips, silly Polaroids with frosting on our faces. Not just of her but us. Together, side by side. The way it used to be, or at least the way I wanted to remember it. I hadn't seen it on the gift table. I walked toward the small table in the corner where wrapped presents were stacked. Nothing stood out as mine. A server nearby noticed me looking and said, "Oh, that one." She told me to slide it under the table. Said it wasn't urgent. I crouched down and pulled it out, unopened. The ribbon still tied. My name on the tag in gold ink. That was the moment I stopped lying to myself. This wasn't an oversight. It was a message. She never meant to open it in front of people, because it didn't fit the version of her life she was performing for them. I walked out to the back patio, beyond the edge of the party where the noise faded into cicada hums and distant cars. I sat, hidden behind the hedges, unwrapped my own gift, and opened the album. Photo after photo, each one anchoring a version of the past no one else seemed to remember. Me, holding her after she broke her ankle. Her wearing my hoodie on a trip to Galveston. Us in matching t-shirts from the county fair. Proof that I had existed, not just in the background, but in the center of things, once. I flipped another page and thought, when no one remembers your kindness, it starts to feel like betrayal to yourself to keep offering it. There wasn't sadness in that moment. There was clarity. I closed the album and slid it back into my bag. The party music shifted to something louder, faster. People were dancing now. I hadn't been missed. I stood, brushed the dust from my heels, and looked out across the lights and laughter I wasn't part of. I wouldn't play the kind one anymore. Not because I had turned cruel, but because silence hadn't protected anyone. It had only made me disappear. This ends soon. She thought it was just a game, but it played quiet long enough. As I re-entered the main garden, the air had shifted. The earlier glow of golden hour had faded into the crisp blur of twilight. People were mingling now, a little looser after a few rounds of wine and champagne. Laughter rose from the fire pit area. Someone turned up the music, but I didn't move toward the crowd. I stood by the far side of the patio, arms folded, watching Isolde command yet another moment. She clapped her hands and announced something about gratitude and legacy before walking toward a wooden easel near the back fence. Draped over it was a black cloth, and with exaggerated ceremony, she pulled it down to reveal a collage of frames photos, notes, names. Above the display was a sign carved into reclaimed wood, "To those who carried me here." The applause was instant. People leaned in to admire it, murmuring. I moved closer, careful not to draw attention. I scanned each section, handwritten letters from her favorite professor, a note from her yoga instructor, a quote from our mom about resilience. Even the nail salon lady had a spotsome, recycled wisdom about persistence and polish. I kept looking. Once. Twice. 3 times. I wasn't there. Not a note, not a name, not even a single picture of the nights I stayed up editing her college essays, or the years I worked double shifts to help her cover car payments when Dad refused. They didn't forget, I thought. They erased. The clapping faded. Isolde gave a coy smile, clearly pleased with the display. She stepped aside and said something about starting a trivia game. People began drifting toward the lawn, excited for another round of attention disguised as entertainment. I turned away, my mouth dry. A bench sat tucked near the hedges. I walked toward it slowly, slid my fingers into my wallet, and pulled out my driver's license. It was a ridiculous impulse, but I needed to see it in my name. Kaylin R. Hathaway. Still mine, still legal, still real. I ran my thumb along the edge of the plastic. No matter how many times they left it off a wall, or a program, or a group text, it still existed. I still existed. From the other end of the yard, Isolde's voice rang out. "Okay, everyone! Who knows me best?" A few cheers followed. I stayed seated, watching from the shadows. She held up a card. First question. Who loaned me money during my freshman year when I couldn't pay for textbooks? I blinked. Someone yelled, "Vera!" Isolde grinned. "Correct!" The crowd clapped. I froze. It had been me. I remembered the wire transfer from my savings account like it was yesterday back when I was still on a tech salary and every $100 hurt. I never asked for her to say anything. I never even expected a thank you. But this was theft, not of money, of memory. Nobody turned toward me. Nobody asked. I stood, brushed my dress, and walked directly toward Isolde. She was laughing as I approached, glass in hand. When she saw me, her smile tightened. "If you keep rewriting the truth," I said calmly, "don't be surprised when I write my part back in." She tilted her head, mocking sweetness. "Relax. It's just a game." "No," I replied, voice low. "It's your version of history, and I've let you have it too long." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence was confirmation. I turned away, slowly, deliberately. I didn't want the crowd. I didn't need applause. But I wanted her to know I wasn't backing down. By the time I returned to my spot on the bench, I didn't feel shaky anymore. I didn't feel invisible. I felt clear. You can only be edited out of the story so many times before you stop waiting for the next page. And I was done waiting. I wasn't asking for recognition anymore. I was reclaiming ownership. As laughter and half-hearted compliments rippled through the backyard, I slipped away from the glow of the lanterns and the clink of wine glasses. There was a narrow stone path that curved around the house, partially hidden behind a line of potted ferns. Small garden lights blinked in and out of the shadows as I walked, each step pulling me further from the noise and closer to what mattered. The path opened into a small alcove where a folding table had been set up, draped in cream linen and adorned with branded pens, favor bags, and glossy brochures. There were framed certificates, 2 testaments to Isolde's bright future and the family's generational impact. But one plaque caught my eye immediately. The Silas Future Leaders Fund mahogany, gold-plated lettering, spotless. I stopped in front of it. My reflection blinked back at me in the polished finish. My name wasn't on it, but I didn't need it to be. They always thought of it as Dad's legacy, I whispered. But it was my signature next to his. I remembered that day. I had been 19. Grandpa Silas' hand trembled as he guided the pen, but mine stayed steady. I had no real money to speak of, just a part-time job and a stubborn sense of duty. Still, ID contributed quietly because Grandpa wanted the fund to live long after he was gone. I'd filed every annual renewal, double-checked every transfer, kept the paperwork legal when no one else was paying attention. Isolde hadn't even come to the signing. She had a photo shoot or a party, one of those vague events that always took precedence. But no one ever remembered that. No one brought up my role. They credited Vera, they praised our father, they centered everything around Isoldeus if the fund had bloomed from their combined greatness. And I had let them. I hadn't corrected them. I hadn't explained. Silence, I was learning, doesn't just keep the peace, it allows history to be rewritten in real time. Every moment I stayed quiet, the truth got a little blurrier. Their version got a little bolder. I pulled my phone from my clutch and scrolled through my inbox. The subject line was still there, unread. Scholarship renewal action required due next month. And there it was, plain as anything. My name under primary co-sponsor. My signature was still the one they needed. A quiet ping vibrated through the evening silence. I stared at the screen, the soft glow painting my hands with light. The control was still mine. They'd just forgotten. Or maybe they hoped I had. Still doing it, huh? The voice startled me. I turned to find a woman lingering a few steps away, nursing a half-full glass of Ross. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, but the face was familiar Kelsey. We had shared a table in AP English years ago. She'd been smart, observant, and mostly quiet. "I'm sorry?" I asked. She walked a little closer. "Isolde. Still pretending everything came from your parents, from the family. I remember freshman year, you bought her books, right? But she told people Vera paid for them. Said you weren't reliable." The words didn't sting the way they once would have. That twist in my chest, tight and cold, didn't come. Instead, there was only clarity. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It had never been confusion. It was calculated erasure. The same kind of tidy rewriting that had scrubbed my name off the fund, off the family stories, off every contribution I had quietly made. Kelsey blinked, maybe catching the change in my expression. "Sorry if that was too much." "It wasn't," I said. "It was overdue." She offered a small nod and wandered toward the bar. I stood there a few moments longer, looking at the plaque knot with pain, but with precision. Then I moved. I made my way to the edge of the yard, where a low stone wall framed a burbling fountain. The music was faint from here. I could still see Isolde through the trees, laughing beneath hanging lanterns, perfect angles for every selfie. She had no idea I was watching. For the first time, that didn't make me feel invisible. It made me feel powerful. I opened my phone again, created a new draft, and typed, "To the Silas Fund Board, I'd like to request a temporary hold on all scholarship renewals tied to my co-sponsorship, effective immediately. I will be re-evaluating current recipients based on updated considerations of character and integrity. Respectfully, Kaylin R. Hathaway." I didn't hit send. Not yet. But I saved it, and that alone felt like closing a circle I didn't even realize had stayed open for so long. Like reclaiming a room I had quietly stepped out of years ago and locking the door behind me. Back on the patio, guests were gathering coats and thank you bags. The lanterns flickered as the evening drew in. I watched Isolde pose once more, smiling too hard, filters smoothing everything. She didn't see me in the dark. But I saw everything, and I no longer felt like the outsider at my own family's celebration. I felt like the storm gathering just beyond the light, calm, silent, and entirely mine to unleash. She tried to laugh me off the stage, but she forgot who built it. I didn't wander far, just far enough to stay in the shadows, to be forgotten, but not out of earshot. I stood under the pergola near the fence line, arms folded, sipping the last of my drink. Arlo stood beside me, quiet, calm. His stillness wasn't out of place, but I could feel the tension behind it. His jaw was set. His eyes never left the scene. Isolde stood on the small deck platform like it was her stage. Technically, it was. She had organized the entire party to celebrate her latest venture, which was vague on paper, but very loud in real life. There she was, all polished pride, holding the mic like a trophy and a flute of sparkling rose like a crown. She smiled no, posed for her audience. "All right," she called out, her voice drenched in honey and vinegar. "One final shout-out before we wrap up tonight." The chatter faded. Heads turned toward her. Lights strung across the patio flickered gently. The crowd leaned in. "To my baby sister," she said, voice rising slightly, "for showing up tonight with her handyman." A beat, then laughter, sharp, gleeful. Some of it half-hearted. The kind that said, "I don't get it, but I'm gonna laugh anyway." One person let out a shrill whistle. Another clapped once. My name was never spoken, but the target was clear. I felt it land like a slap that didn't sting me, but echoed off Arlo. He didn't shift, he didn't blink. But I saw it, heard it. And in that moment, he waited. He didn't speak for me. He didn't try to shield me. He waited to see what I would choose to do. I handed him my glass, and I walked. Every step across the lawn felt heavier than the last. But not with Shimeno. I was done with that. What weighed me down was the knowledge that I'd let her do this for far too long. Isolde had always found a way to make me small, always in passing, always with an audience. She didn't see me approach at first. Her back was half turned as she laughed, still basking in the afterglow of her joke. I stepped into the circle. The laughter died. I stood just close enough to smell the sickly floral perfume she used, God. That scent. It took me back to high school, when she'd spritz my pillows just to make me angry before bed. Always a joke, always a jab. She blinked at me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Mock me all you want, I said, steady and clear, but don't drag Arlo into your insecurity parade. For the first time in a long time, she didn't have a comeback ready, just a flicker of confusion. Then she smirked, that trademark tilt of the head. Hez a big boy, he can take it. I nodded once. So can I. But I won't, not anymore. Silence, no applause, no gasps, just a quiet that carried weight. People exchanged glances, no one interrupted. I turned and walked away. I didn't need to stay for her reaction. I already knew it. Shed smirk, maybe roll her eyes, maybe whisper something biting to the person next to her. But I'd already won the only thing that mattered. I didn't shrink. Later that night, Arlo and I sat side by side on the back steps of my place, shoes kicked off, feet on the cool brick. The stars above were faint, barely visible past the trees, but the quiet was good. Clean. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, fingers laced. I don't need her apology, he said finally. I looked at him, but I needed to see how you'd handle it. And? I asked. He turned his head toward me, no trace of a smile, just that grounded look he always had when something mattered. You didn't flinch. A breath escaped me, slow. Not relief, just release. I'm done, I said softly, done cushioning her ego, done making myself palatable. He nodded once, then leaned back against the railing, his gaze climbing toward the sky. We didn't say much else. We didn't need to. Later, in bed, I pulled out a journal I hadn't touched in almost a year. Most of the pages were empty, save for a few hopeful entries near the front. I turned to a blank one and wrote, "No more shrinking, no more silence, no more pretending." The pen lingered in my hand before I closed the journal. The words felt final, like vows. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a calendar alert. Family brunch at Isolde's 10 a.m. I stared at it, then deleted it. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the draft email I'd written the night before. The one about the scholarship trust I had helped fund. I didn't send it. Not yet. But I flagged it. Labeled it high importance. Isolde would wake expecting my usual silence. She'd expect me to show up, sit through coffee, and perform civility while being talked over, dismissed, used as a backdrop to her own highlight reel. But tomorrow the chair would be empty. And the silence I left behind? It would be louder than anything I ever said. She played loud. I ended it silent. Sunday morning drifted in without fanfarino buzzing phone. No urgent emails. Just the low hum of a quiet city. I'd parked near my usual cafe on South Congress, a modest corner spot with good coffee and better silence. Halfway through a sip of something barely warm, my screen lit up. Langford Silas Fund. Subject, you'll want to hear this? No body text, just an audio file. I didn't hesitate. I tapped play. Her voice. Isolde. She was giggling, her words slurring slightly from what sounded like an early buzz. Background chatter. The clink of glasses, maybe a wine bar. Her voice was smug, careless. Oh, please. I just have to smile for a few months. The money's basically free. I don't even have to pretend that hard. Another woman laughed along, someone who clearly wasn't loyal anymore. Maybe she never was. The recording ended. Silence filled the car again. Outside the window, people strolled by in slow motion. Inside, plates clinked behind the caf glass. Life was still moving, but I had stopped. I didn't speak, didn't scream, didn't even blink, because this wasn't just betrayal. It was mockery. Isolde had never respected the scholarship. She'd treated it like a performance, a role to play until the check cleared. But now the curtain had fallen, and someone whoever sent the file had made sure I had a front row seat. I didn't need to know who. All I needed was the truth. And now I had it. I opened my email, fingers steady, and typed 5 calm, deliberate lines. I acknowledge receipt of the attached audio. I approve the immediate suspension of all scholarship funds under my co-sponsorship. Effective today. Please confirm receipt. Kaylin R. Hathaway. I hit send. And for the first time in a long while, I let myself breathe. That afternoon, I arrived at brunch, a rooftop setup Vera had arranged at some boutique hotel, with linen menus and overpriced garnishes. Arlo wasn't with me. I told him this one wasn't worth the energy. Vera greeted me with a thin smile and a tight hug. "Let's keep it civil today," she whispered, like a warning. I smiled back. "Not fake, just final, already handled." She looked puzzled, but didn't press. I found my seat across from Isolde. She was mid-sentence, fluttering through talk of alumni committees and international panels, her laughter trailing the way perfume does designed, distant, untouchable. She hadn't seen the email yet. Her phone lay flat on the table, face down. So I waited. 15 minutes in, as Vera complimented the waiter's French accent for the third time, Isolde casually picked up her phone and tapped the screen. That's when it happened. No gasp, no theatrics, just stillness. Her entire expression shifted, not collapsed, but hardened. Her posture shrank in, her shoulders pulled taut, jaw clenched. She stared at the screen for a long time, eyes flicking back and forth, as if rereading something she couldn't unsee. She lowered the phone slowly. The mimosa in front of her remained untouched. "Excuse me," she said, voice low. "I need to make a call." No one asked questions. No one offered to go with her. She stood and walked away, her heels clicking too loudly on the tiled floor. I didn't watch her leave. Instead, I folded my napkin with quiet precision and let the moment settle. There was no need for raised voices, no dramatic speech, no public reckoning, just one decision, one revoked signature, and one very clear message. Langford's reply came less than an hour later. Funds suspended. Acknowledged. I stood, nodded politely to Vera, and walked away from the table. No announcements, no goodbyes. The sun hit me like truth when I stepped onto the street hot, unrelenting and clear. I squinted into it, letting the light reach all the places Isolde's shadow used to cover. There was no guilt, no regret, just release. Because storms don't always need thunder to destroy what's weakly built. And while she'd played her game in the spotlight, I'd ended it from the shadows, with silence sharper than any scream. And now, she could keep her performance. The stage was mine. The apology never came. But silence? It did the talking for her. Monday looked like any other. I got up, put the kettle on, and fed the neighbor's cat, who barely acknowledged me. I watered the porch plants half-heartedly. Those succulents always looked on the verge of quitting anyway. Then I sat down at the table, my laptop already open like it had been waiting for me. There it was, still sitting in my drafts. The email. It wasn't a last-minute decision. It had been marinating for days, maybe even weeks. Every time I hovered over the send button, something inside me wavered, not out of doubt, but conditioning. That old reflex to smooth things over, to make sure everyone else stayed comfortable. Not this time. Subject: formal withdrawal of co-sponsorship Silas Fund. I didn't change a word. It was precise, factual, and unemotional. No accusations, no barbed sentences. Just the truth. I read it one last time and clicked send. No dramatic music cue. No deep cinematic exhale. Just a soft, internal shift like finally taking off a coat you didn't realize had been suffocating you. I stood up, opened the window, and let the breeze in. It wasn't victory. It was peace. 5 minutes later, Langford replied. Acknowledged. Will notify the applicant and board immediately. Short, cold, perfect. I gave a small nod to no one in particular, imagining him typing that response with the same tight professionalism. Across the city, I pictured her, easily checking her inbox. Maybe she was at her favorite caf. Maybe she was rehearsing one of her public speeches about leadership and resilience, and then just 6 sentences that ended the performance. I wasn't there when she read it. Didn't need to be, but I got a front row seat to the aftermath. That afternoon, she posted on her social media, polished, ambiguous, completely on brand. Due to unexpected shifts in funding, I've chosen to defer my program until next year. Trusting the process, trusting divine timing. I almost smiled. The comments rolled in like clockwork. Proud of you for handling this with such grace. God's delays are not denials. Setbacks are setups. You've got this. Let them believe what they want. Because this wasn't about punishing her. It was about ending the story they all insisted I keep playing a role in. I wasn't stealing anything. I was finally reclaiming what was already me time, my energy, my boundaries. Later that evening, my phone lit up. Vera. For a second, I thought about letting it go to voicemail. But I knew better. Vera didn't call unless something was off script. I answered. Hello? She skipped the pleasantries. Did you do something to your sister's funding? Her voice wasn't angry, just unnerved, like the world tilted and she hadn't found her footing yet. I didn't rush to respond. Let her sit in it. Then, softly but firmly, I said, No, I did something for myself. That threw her. I heard it in the way her breath caught, like she was reaching for the next line in a script that had suddenly disappeared. For years, it'd been the fixer, the peacemaker, the one who nodded, who helped, who stayed quiet while they stepped on me with a smile. That person? She retired. I didn't explain myself, didn't offer details. I ended the call gently and didn't pick it back up, because I owed no one a defense for finally choosing myself. That night, the silence in the house felt different. Not hollow-earned. Arlo was working late, and I didn't bother with the TV. I didn't scroll or text or distract. I lit a candle, poured jasmine tea into a wide ceramic mug, and sat on the rug by the window. Outside, the world kept spinning. Porch lights blinked on. Someone walked their dog. A car idled at the stop sign before disappearing into the quiet. Inside, it was just me. But for once, that wasn't lonely. It was whole. Some storms come screaming through with lightning and fire. Others take their time seeping under the doors, through the cracks, dripping steadily until the foundation weakens and the walls begin to shift. That's the kind of storm we'd all been living in. But when the ceiling caves, no one gets to pretend they didn't see the water stains. Let them act surprised. Let them say they didn't know. I'll know the truth. I'll know exactly when the first drop landed, when I hit send. And it wasn't revenge. It was release. 3 days after I sent the email, a package arrived at my doorstep. No name on the return label. Just an address I hadn't seen in years, an old storage facility in Pflugerville I'd forgotten even existed. I brought it inside, opened it slowly. Inside, an old banker's box. Dusty, taped unevenly. Underneath a faded blanket was a manila envelope. No postage, just my name. The handwriting made my chest tighten before I even touched it. Silas. It was his handwriting. I sat down at the kitchen table. My hands didn't shake, but my breath caught as I slid my finger under the seal. To the granddaughter who kept the promise when no one was looking. I stopped reading, just sat there, closed my eyes. The letter wasn't long. He'd written it sometime before the fund was finalized, dated in blue ink at the top. He thanked me for staying beside him during the long hours of paperwork, for showing up when no one else had time. He said, "You're not loud, you're not flashy, but you show up. You follow through. That's how I knew you'd carry this forward. That's why your name is on the signature line, not theirs." I cried, but not the way I had before. It wasn't grief, or rage, or the sting of being ignored. It was relief. a release I didn't know my body had been holding for years. Later that week, word began to ripple through the family. Not because of me, but because Isolde's version of the story was starting to crack. Some cousin from Arkansas messaged me. What happened to Isolde's program? A distant aunt asked, why would Langford cut her funding like that? And then there was Vera. She called on a Thursday evening. I answered. Kaylin, what did you do? I waited. Let her question breathe. I didn't do anything, I said. I just stopped pretending. Can't we all just move on? I already have. There was silence on the other end. No outrage, no plea. Just the quiet realization that her usual tools guilt, image, family reputation didn't work on me anymore. That weekend, she sent an email invite, family reset dinner, let's heal together. I declined. Instead, I visited the scholarship office downtown. I handed them a framed copy of Silas' letter and asked that it be kept with the official records. This belongs with the history of the fund, I said. It tells the part no one else recorded. The receptionist gave me a quiet smile and nodded. I walked out of that building lighter, not because I'd won anything, but because I was no longer trying to be chosen by people who never intended to see me. That evening, Arlo and I took a walk through the park near my place. It was quiet, a few kids on bikes, the smell of grilled food in the distance. We passed a community center under renovation. A new sign was being installed, mentorship, growth, connection. Arlo looked at me. You feel lighter? I shook my head. Not lighter, just clearer. We stood there a moment, watching the workers finish drilling the sign in place. I turned toward him. Maybe it's time I invest in something better. He didn't ask what I meant. He didn't have to. Some scars don't fade,